Good afternoon, everyone. I just received my Motorguide Xi3 and I wanted to walk through installing it on my Bonafide SS127. I want to walk through the entire process, some of the decisions that I've made. Some of them might be wrong, some of them might be right, but I wanted to put it all on camera so that others might benefit from it. I'm going to walk through each step of the process, and hopefully that gives you a better understanding of how you would install a Motorguide Xi3 onto a Bonafide SS127. There's a few videos out there on the web now, but they're mostly after the fact, what it looks like after it's all done. And I wanted to go from the beginning all the way to the end, and this will probably take me several days to do. I do have some parts on order that aren't here yet. So once those parts arrive, we'll get to those sections as well. But I wanted to walk through the entire process, and hopefully this is of value to you. So first, I'm going to get started on a pattern that I saw a guy put together for installing it on the front. And I'm going to walk through that process, and we'll see where we go. Alright, so one of the first steps in the operation is to decide how you're going to mount it onto the bow. Well, most of what I've seen is using the quick release plate. Of course, you remove the paddle strap here, and of course it's held on with these screws and washers. I'm going to reuse those. Some of what I have seen is that folks have installed the mounting plate directly onto the pad here. And just remove and put the screws and washers right back in these holes. But I saw a video from a guy who created an aluminum plate that extended to these holes, and then sort of a T fashion here, and we'll see that in a minute as I begin to create this template. And of course he fashioned it out of aluminum using a CNC machine. I don't have that kind of sophistication, but what I did do is I ordered a cutting board, a plastic cutting board. It's a 1/2 inch thick. It hasn't arrived yet, but it should be here in the next day or two. But I need to create a template here that I would then transfer to the board and cut it out and do some polish up work, some finishing work on it. The idea here is that I have 4 screws here, mounting holes. And if I use those and then extend into this area here, I can mount the mounting plate directly onto that board. Hopefully what that does for me is it allows me to not drill into this area at all. If I mount the quick release plate directly to that cutting board that's then affixed based on these 4 points. Hopefully that gives me enough stability that I don't have to drill into this. I may eventually have to put a drill, maybe one right here towards the nose to give it some additional stability and torsional rigidity here. But I hope I don't have to do that. So the first step in that operation is going to be to begin to lay out the template here. So I'm going to set up for that, and then we'll walk through what my intent is to do there. So I'll see you in a minute. Okay, so what I've done is I've marked a center line here across the pad, and then I've taped this legal sheet of paper to 1/2 of it. So the intent is that I will draw the pattern here on this half sheet, get it to my liking, and then I'll mirror that, and that becomes the full template. The idea here is that I want to make sure that it's wide enough at the front here to be able to support this entire the entire block here. What I don't want is to create it just wide enough for the inset. This is what will be bolted onto the cutting board, but I want some additional support for the motor itself. So if it's as wide as the entire mounting plate, then it covers the entire bottom of the trolling motor as well. So it'll give it a little bit more stability, I think. So the other thing that I'm contemplating here is whether or not I want to bring it all the way over here to the edge here on these sides, so that it gives it a, you know, something, so it doesn't move this away. So if it's right up against these, then that's probably a good thing as well. So that may be what I do here as well. So let me start to draw on here. The idea is that I want it to cover, so I can feel this here, I can feel this here, and of course that needs to, you know, this dives in just a little bit. So I want to make sure that I am marking it roughly to where those zones are. And then, so that sort of gives me the, where I'm going to here. So once I get this rough cut out, then I'll fit it in here appropriately. And I'm going to mark some other marks here. So the idea is that we want it to go from side to side here as cleanly as possible. So I'm going to put a mark here as well, and then I'm going to put a mark down here. Okay, so I've got those points marked, and I'm going to go ahead. All right, so now that I have these rough points marked, I'm going to pull the paper off and connect some of these dots, trim it out, and see where that takes us. You know, see how close that fits to what I want here. I may have to do this a couple times, but eventually I'll get a half a pattern that I like, and then I can just duplicate that for the other side. So let me get on with that, and I'll be back with you shortly. Okay, so here's my rough cutout. I'm liking it. So I think I got this line really nice. This is a 1/2 inch board, so it's gonna come up a little high, and I got the bottom of these wells pretty nicely too. So I'm a little long here, so I'll need to trim off just a little bit here, and I'm liking it. It's looking pretty good. Okay, so I've been working on the template, and I'm pretty satisfied with what I've got here. So again, we've got these wings going out here, and again, this will be a plastic cutting board that I'll cut to this shape that's a 1/2 inch thick. So the placement of the quick connect is going to go somewhere in this area. So the plastic cutting board is going to go all the way to support the entire length of this. This actually sits a little bit proud of the bow. It's not in the way of the carry handle at all, so that's good news. And I've placed the motor on here in this position to ensure that I have the adequate overhang and distance from the handle that allows it to do what it needs to do. Okay, so the next decision point was where to actually put the battery. So I ordered a 85 amp hour battery, and really there's two options here, or actually three. So one would be to put it in the front hatch. That would produce a weight issue in my opinion. Too much weight on the front. The trolling motor would be on the front. The battery also in the front. The battery weighs 55 pounds, so I really don't want to put that into the front. So this is my normal setup here when I'm out on the water. In the back tank, I've got my Flambeau crate. This is the one that has both the lower unit and the upper unit, so I keep all my plastics in the upper unit, and I keep all my boxes in the lower unit. I've got rod holders on both sides, so I can hold 4 in off of the crate. And then this is my Wilderness Systems heavy-duty kayak cart, and when I'm on the water, I flip it upside down and store it right there I've got some additional bungees or cord that I strap it on so that if I were to have an issue, you know, it's attached to the kayak. So there's really two options back here. One is I could use this space here and put the battery here, in which case I'm a bit constrained because I've got the width between here, and I don't want to really have to wrestle around the battery when I put my cart in and out. I don't want to worry about cables getting caught, that kind of thing. So there is this otherwise dead space here in front of the cart, or in front of the crate rather. And so this is where I've decided to put the battery. I think it's far enough back that I'm not going to have a weight distribution issue. It's right behind the seat, and ultimately I think this is a good position for it. So there's some other considerations here. I mean, it would fit perfectly in this area without having to rearrange anything else that I'm doing in the kayak. This also gives me the ability to put my plugs on vertical surfaces that will be out of the way. I'm not quite sure yet whether or not I'll put it on this surface or on this surface. I'll just have to see how that plays out. The other thing that I'm contemplating here long term is right now I run a Raymarine Dragonfly 7 as a fish finder. As you may know, that the Motorguide motor actually will talk to Lowrance through the Namiya system, the network. So that's my long-term goal, is to swap out my Raymarine with a Lowrance and be able to have, you know, ultimate control here of the thing. So that raises another issue. I need to be able to have power to the Namiya system. I already run power to my fish finder, my chart, out of the dry pod. And I've already got a battery for that, a lithium ion battery, the Wilderness Systems lithium ion, that works great. I think it will also be powerful enough to deal with a Lowrance unit if I put that in here. So that should all be good. I've got battery up here. What I don't have is battery for the Namiya. So my thought here, in order to get access to this area to run any wires at all, is I'm going to ultimately put a deck plate here. That'll give me access to put my mounts here effectively, and that also gives me access to run my Namiya and power it off this battery as well. So that's my long-term plan. I've got the deck plate on order. It should be here next week, and I can get to wiring up this back area. But for now, I can start wiring up the front. So the idea here is that I've ordered a kit actually from OEX in San Diego, and that kit comes with some unique concepts. So what they have done is they've developed a system, because we all know that if we put a trolling motor on the front, how do you deploy the thing? How do you retrieve it? Because they all have foot pedals, whether it's a Motorguide or whether it's a Minn Kota. You still got to be able to unlock something in order to be able to pull the motor up and down. So OEX out of San Diego has come up with a pretty interesting idea here that I'll be working with as well. So they actually have the Motorguide foot plate. They've actually installed on the bottom of it, and I'll show this as we get to it, a mounting here, and they run a paracord through a grommet underneath the deck, and they route it around here, and ultimately they come out right here with another grommet and a pull handle. And the idea is that when you're in the seated position, you can reach down and grab that handle and pull the handle, which will depress the pedal at the front, and then they'll have another handle that will run to the other side that's mounted to the top of the top neck of the motor, that allows you to pull it up or to release it to drop down. So it's a pretty cool system. I'll put a link under the video here to that kit, and they send you everything you need. Other than the battery. So I've got the plugs both front and back, then the receptacles front and back. I've got additional wire that they send that will allow me to place the battery in the back and be able to power it from the front. And ultimately the front plug probably will go in this area. Haven't quite decided yet, but I think that this is where I'll be putting the front plug, somewhere here. So with all that in mind, on to the next step, and I think the next step is to talk about drilling the holes that will ultimately run my paracord from the front here all the way to where I'm seeing. Okay, so this is the bushing that OEX sent. There's two of these, one for up front here and one for back by the seat. So it should install somewhere in this location, and it needs to be fairly far forward. So I've measured with where the trolling motor is going to sit and where that pedal is in relation to that, and the pedal should end somewhere about here, and this seems to be a good spot for it. And it just so happens that the V here matches the V angle here as well pretty nicely, so that allows me to tuck it back up in here a bit. So the idea here is that I'm going to mark this location. First I'm going to mark it with a small drill bit to mark where I want the center to be. And then secondly, I've got a hole saw kit, but I don't have one that's quite small enough for this, because this is going to have to set, this will be where the top sets, and then this will sit below deck, and that gives the bushing, as this paracord goes through it, so that it doesn't bind on anything. So that's the idea here, is that I'm then going to take this Forstner bit and I'm going to use that to make the hole that I'll eventually install this into. So with that said, I'm going to crack onto it, and like I said, I want to record as much of this as possible so you can sort of see what I'm facing, what I'm up against here. Get a little bit more light on the subject here. Okay, so I like that location for the hole, so I'm going to drill it out. Okay. Okay, so that then becomes my pilot hole for my Forstner bit. Okay, fingers crossed. It's always interesting drilling into your yak. Okay, so I want to get the tip of my Forstner bit right in that hole. Okay, good. And then slow and steady. All right, there she goes. All right, I think I'm going to save these shavings. You never know when you need to do a repair or anything, so give me a minute to collect all these shavings and I'll be right back. Okay, so the next step will be to get some nylon lock screw and nut for this. So I'll make those holes, and then we should be golden here on this front bushing. Okay, so we're ready to do some drills here, some holes. Okay, some more shavings to collect. All right, so here's the question. It is possible that water will get into this grommet, this bushing, and there's not a whole lot I can do to prevent the water from getting in there. So the question is, should I use some marine sealant on the screws? I'm kind of thinking no in this case. I don't, if water gets in, somehow finds its way into the screw, and I've drilled these holes just slightly smaller than the screw, or the bolt rather in this case. If water finds it is going to find it into that spot, it's more likely to find it into this spot. Although this is raised up a bit, if I have water on the deck, could leak into there. You know what? Better safe than sorry. Let me put some marine sealant on the thing and make sure that I do what I can. So let me go collect those materials and I'll be back. Okay, so this is the 3M marine adhesive sealant I'm going to use. I'm just going to put a dab on each of these holes. And on goes the bushing and let's drive these bolts in. Good, we're getting some threading. That's what I wanted. Alright, now to reach under and install the nylon nuts and getting it all tightened up. So I'll be right back. Alright, excellent. First one in place. Nice. Alright, so let me get set up now to install the second one towards the cockpit, and we'll do that one as well. Okay, so OEX sent 2 bushings. One of them, the one we used up front, had the nylon lock washers, but the one here that's going to go right here next to the seat, as you can imagine, you can't get access behind this, so putting lock washers on, or nylon lock washers, would be a real challenge for here. So they included 2 versions of it, one that had the what we needed for the lock washers, and these have some screws that'll suck it down. So they sent 2 different ones. I'll have to figure out why we got 2. Looks like these, one of them are countersunk, the others are not. So I'll have to figure out which ones I'm going to use. But needless to say, it's going to go somewhere in this location here. I want it as high up as possible so that I can keep my paracord as high tucked up under the deck as I can, and keep the handle off from laying on the deck. Now they also included a cleat. Let me go get that and we'll talk about both of them together. Okay, so this is the cleat that they've sent as well. Let me pull it off of this. All right. So the idea is that the cleat and the bushing should be mounted in a position where you could actually, because the paracord's going to go through the cleat and the handle will be on the end of the paracord, and this allows you then, once you've pulled it up, to lock it in so that it will stay depressed So that allows you, if you absolutely needed to, you could do the deploy and retrieve one-handed. You use this one first and lock it into the open position. Then using the same hand, you could pull it up. So I haven't yet decided whether or not I'm going to use the cleat or not. I may defer on that, but I'm going to install the bushing in a place where, if I put it way up here, I'm probably not going to get the right vantage point for the cleat. So with that said, I'm going to install my bushing at about this location. And we're all good on our bushings. So I'm going to collect up these filings again and save them in case I need them later. But here we go, 2 projects done. Next we'll work on getting the paracord routed correctly. Okay, so the next operation is to route the paracord. So since last time, I've attached the S connector here to the paracord, and I've run the paracord back through this hole here. So we're all set there. So the next thing is to tuck it up under the deck. So OEX sent 2 of these that will be mounted up under the deck like so, and the positions that we're going to put it in are going to be approximately here and then again down here. So the idea is that these will be mounted underneath, and the cord will run through that on its way back to the sidewall near the cockpit. So what this has to do, underneath the deck where these screws are, there is a protrusion, and I want to be able to avoid that. So I've got to move this forward enough. I mean, this is what's going to cause it to make the turn. So just feeling there, that looks good. So this will be the position of the first one. Now it came with silver headed screws. I didn't really like that, so I've got a whole bunch of these 1032 3/4 length with a nylon lock nut on it as well. And so I'm going to be using these instead. They're the similar diameter, but instead it's got a black head instead of a silver head. I know silver would match these, but I kind of like the cleaner look of the all black. So that's what I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to mount, I'm going to drill some holes here, use my marine sealant, and get these 2 installed. All right, so this is what she looks like installed. So again, I'm glad I went with the black screws here. And from the underside, let's see if I can get a decent look here. So again, the paracord runs through that loop eye, pad eye, and then we'll put another one towards the rear, and that will keep it up at the deck. So again, it runs through that. Okay, so onward with the next one. Okay, so we're installed at our second location here. So got all of the marine sealant cleaned up around it. Again, let's see what this looks like from the underside. So the paracord runs through that as well, so that keeps the paracord tucked up nicely under the deck. And of course we have movement here. So all right, on to the next project. All right, so the next step in the operation is to mount the receptacle, and I'm thinking it's going to go somewhere in this location here, near enough to the motor. Ideally you'd want this on a vertical surface so you don't have any chance of water getting in. They do build these with drain holes in them, so if water does get in, it drains through. But the concern that I have here, I've got a hole saw, which is, you know, the right size for this. The problem is that when this plug goes in, and you line up these arrows here, so there's an arrow here that says insert, and there's an arrow here. So you line those two up, and then you actually twist it to lock it in. That twisting mechanism is what concerns me here. If I were to drill the hole out to the exact diameter so that it just slips in, there's nothing that prevents it from spinning in the hole, and I don't want that at all. So they do have these flat sections on either side here. I guess the intent here is that if you have a hole that is not perfectly round and you've got these flat spots on it, that prevents it from spinning. Well, if I use my hole saw to do that, you know, I'm not going to have any opportunity to create these flat spots. So the next smallest hole saw size is really too small for to deal with. But I do have another Forstner bit, and this is the collar that goes around it. So this is the diameter. So I'm just inside the collar here with enough play that I think if I do the hole first with the Forstner bit and then do some filing to shape the hole so that I have both the flat and large enough for the curve, it's going to take quite a bit of fiddling to get the hole quite right. But I think I'd rather do that and have this receptacle so that it doesn't spin in the hole. That just leads to all sorts of issues down the road. You know, the wires inside could get all spun around and twisted up, and I really don't want that. So I think I'm going to put in the extra work to drill a smaller hole than what I normally would, and then to do a whole bunch of custom filing and fitting to try to get this right. So that's the plan. Let's see how it plays out. Okay, well, she's in. It did take quite a bit of fiddling to get this hole just the right shape, but it looks good. So here's the plug. I'm gonna line up my arrows. Where's my arrow? There's my arrow, arrow on there. In she goes, twist, and it looks great. There's no twisting at all in the receptacle, so out we come, and it's all good. Very happy with that. Okay, so I went back and reviewed the tape, and I realized that I didn't get a very good shot of this template creation. So wanted to take a few moments here and talk about, again, what I did, what it looks like. So again, this is the template that the cutting board is going to be patterned after. So the idea again here is that it'll be affixed at the existing screw points that used to hold the paddle holder. And having that and this much mass here, I'm hoping I can get away with not having to drill a hole or any holes into the pad at all here. So that's my hope, and I wanted you to see the template before I affix it to the board and did all of that. So this is essentially what that looks like. All right, folks, so my cutting board came in. So again, it's a commercial grade cutting board. It's made of plastic of some sort. This is my template. So now starts the process of getting the thing cut out, and we'll go from there. All right, so here's the rough cut, and got some sanding to do on it. Yeah, so far I think it looks good. Either which side. Yep. So I think this will work. Well, looky there. It ain't perfect, but it is super stable, and I think that's gonna work well. So now this block will mount on right about here. This all looks pretty good. So on the screws, the strap plus the washer comes to about 3/8 of an inch. So again, this is a 1/2 inch board. So I just had, you know, enough to countersink the screws, and I can reuse the same screws, same depth. We're all looking pretty good here. So I think this is going to be a great solution. And then, yeah, so I think this is going to work well. All right, next step, get this affixed. To do that, I'm going to have to get the motor and get it on here and make sure that everything is hunky-dory here before I commit to putting the screws on here. So that'll be my next step. I'll see you soon. Okay, well, this is what she looks like. So we got the wings mounted in. So my auxiliary plate here. She looks really good. I've got the requisite 1/2 inch here. This all looks really nice. And then of course this is the foot pedal depression gizmo here. All right. Well, I am pretty happy with that. All right, everyone. It's been a couple days since I got this installed, and I've been thinking, do I really trust these 4 screws? I have a lot of money on the end of this bow, and if those screws were to fail, the whole thing would dump in. And am I really willing to trust these 4 screws? Now, if these were screwed into wood, I'd probably say yes. But they're screwed into this plastic hull. And you know what? I'm not gonna trust that I'm not gonna have an issue with it. So I think what I'm gonna do, I need a little insurance. I still like the board. I still like, you know, the cleanness of it. I still like what it's doing here, but I need some insurance. So I think I'm gonna install at least 1 bolt into this, just to make sure that this plate is not gonna fall off the front of the boat. Okay, so the next step in the operation is to get power from the front of the boat back to the back. And I've already talked about this being a good location for the battery. It fits nicely right in front of the crate, and you know, fits in this otherwise unused area fairly well. Now I've got some post caps on order. You have an issue, I suppose, here is, or a question, whether or not you should use a battery box or not. And the idea behind that, I suppose, is to keep the battery as dry as possible. The only place on the battery that is potentially susceptible to moisture is going to be the battery terminals themselves. And I think if I get those, I've got some silicone, you know, compression fit for these posts, and I think that'll do the job. I've got right now wired up here just my recharging harness, and I'm going to also have the power run to it as well. And I'm also going to go ahead and pre-wire it for an SAE connector that eventually I will use to power the NMEA system. So I'm going to go ahead and get all that wired up and get all the covers on as appropriate. So one of the nice things about this location is I've got these bungees here that, you know, are going to help hold it in place. So obviously it's going to be able to slide back and forth a little bit, but it's not moving. I mean, it's held down pretty nicely. Okay, so I have the seat here in place because I wanted to show the idea here. You know, one approach is that if I want to try to get the plug itself on a vertical surface, I could install it down into here or on the other side, and that would be a good place to get it out of the way. The problem with that approach is that being able to access it, you know, from this access plate that I haven't installed yet, getting my arm in this 4-inch hole all the way to the back side of this to be able to properly secure
the plug on the back side, I don't think my arm is going to be able to bend that way. So I think I have to abandon the idea of putting it on this vertical surface. So I think I'm going to install it on this horizontal surface. I can get at it from the hatch plate that I'm going to install. I'll be able to wire it up effectively. It'll be convenient. I've got the seat here in place. I've got it in the low position all the way as far to the rear as it will go. And I don't have any issues at all with the plug being in the way of the seat. I'm going to try it in the high position as well, just to make sure I'm not overlooking anything. But I think this is going to be my pattern. So right now I'll have the deck plate installed here towards the, in the center of this section here. And then I'll be able to easily access this. And then eventually, when I put in the Namiya system, I'm going to run that using some through deck, Hobie or Wilderness Systems or something, the same thing that you would use on the dry pod. So those won't be plugged; they'll be run through, through a hole, and then I'll have a cable there that I'll need to plug into, I take that back. I'm using SAE because I can do a flush mount SAE on here as well, and then I can plug it directly in. Well, another step is completed here. So I mentioned the deck plate that I was going to mount, so that's done here. Got some marine sealant underneath, so it should be good to go. I've installed the plug for the rear here, so now we have power continuously from the front all the way to the back. And again, the battery will be sitting here. I'll show you a little bit more what I've done on the battery here in a bit. So I wanted to point out that you need to do a circuit breaker here, and I've actually done it in line. I didn't want to have it exposed. Again, I'm not running a battery cover, so I didn't want this on the battery. So this is what I've done. I've done it in line. So this one comes from the trolling motor. This goes to the plug, which then goes to the battery. So this gets me my circuit breaker in line, and I don't have to worry about that. And then once I get the deck plate on, then we are water sealed and we're all good to go. So the deck plate is in place and we are watertight here as well. So in my mind, this is a pretty clean install back here. And again, to keep you up, eventually I'm gonna run power to my Namiya, and that will plug in approximately here. Now I did have to move the plug a bit. I was going to bring it back a little further this way, but once the seat is in the high position, there's a bar that runs across here that would interfere with it. Okay, well, she's done. So I'm going to do a little walkthrough. I've got her rigged up as I generally would out on the water. So we'll start again from the front and review some of the components. So as you recall, I fashioned this mounting plate out of a commercial cutting board. It's made out of plastic, and I created a template for it. It's affixed by the 4 points that the paddle holder normally would be using, plus there's another bolt that goes all the way through right about in this location in the center. So we're secure on the front. The kit that I got from OEX, which I would highly recommend, comes with some additional features. So underneath the pedal here, they've created this hook capability. So we've got this hook that runs to some paracord. That paracord then goes through this bushing that was also supplied by OEX. There's a couple of routing pad eyes that are mounted upside down both here and here, that routes this paracord all the way back to next to the seat here. So I've got a handle here, pull on the handle, that depresses the pedal, and we're ready to deploy. So this other handle here, this is what's going to guide the motor down. So again, OEX supplied this block here. So this is what that handle is tied to. So this rope helps you both guide the motor down and to pull it back up. Again, so it's a two-step operation. One is you use the handle to depress the use the handle here to use the paracord here to depress this handle. Use the paracord here to depress this foot plate. That releases the motor, and down she would go. All right, so some other things to point out is we've got over here a plug. So this plug is mounted to the bottom of the deck plate here. This is a quick release plug. It's waterproof when not in use. So with the plug here, again, the plug and the receptacle were provided by OEX as well in their kit. So that plugs the motor in here. So again, to disconnect quickly, I'm going to undo the paracord under the pedal. I'm going to release this, unplug, and motor comes off. The mounting plate here remains, as well as the quick release block that is in companion with this mounting. All right, so that's the front of the boat here, and also what's happening in the cockpit. So again, we have two handles, one here and one here for raising and lowering the motor. All right, as we move back a little further, so this is how I normally would be running in the rear. I've got my Flambeau crate here with my plastics up top, my boxes below. When I'm on the water, my Wilderness Systems cart is installed here. I got some additional bungee that attaches it to this. So what's new back here is the battery. So a couple things to note here. I installed this deck plate for access because I have also installed this plug here. And this plug runs to the battery and also then connects to the plug up front. So when that's all set, then we have power to the motor. I've got a couple other plugs here, or a couple other cables that are here. As I mentioned in the video, eventually I would like to run a NMEA system. I've got a Raymarine Dragonfly right now. I'm eventually going to sell that and swap that out for a Lowrance TI2, which will talk to the motor through the NMEA system. So that NMEA system I'm already planning for. The access plate here will give me access to install another plug here that will be of a SAE variety. Let's see if I can pull that plug out of here. So right here. So again, this is a waterproof plug here that will eventually connect into my NMEA system. So I've already installed that on the battery, and I've also installed here, this is a charging port here. So my battery charger connects right to this, so I can connect or charge the battery without having to mess with the terminals. So I debated here whether or not I should use a battery box or not. I mean, the real idea here is you need to keep the terminals dry. So I found another solution here, and that's with these silicone terminal protectors. So they fit tightly. They're round on the bottom, and they fit tightly over the battery post. So this is a really nice watertight seal over both. The 3 cables run out of here just great. And I think this is going to be a great solution here. So I can lift the battery in and out. This particular battery comes with handles. And of course, these 3 bungees strapped across the top of it is a great way to keep it from moving around too much. Now, it's going to move side to side just a little bit, but on the water, I doubt that that's going to transpire. But all in all, this is the running setup. And it took me quite a few days to get all of this put together. The only thing that I have left that I'm going to do is underneath where these where the wires running front to back, I'm gonna affix those up to the top of the deck plate as much as I can, so that I don't get in the way of my rods and stuff as I'm loading rods in and out of here. So give me a minute to set it up, and I'll show you how the deploy of the motor works as well. Okay, so we're all set up here. I'm going to pull on this handle to depress the plate, and then down goes the motor and in place. All right. And I'm grabbing the remote, and let's turn it on. Okay. So now we're moving. We can turn here. And adjust. So all in all, turning it off. Very happy with the system and how it's installed. Okay, so let's show you how it comes up. And again, I'm standing beside the kayak, so it's a little awkward to do it from this angle. But so here we go. We're depressing the pedal here by pulling that, and then we're pulling her up. All right, so that's how she runs. Pretty excited. Tomorrow will be the maiden voyage.